Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Parent, and I am the CEO of Court Square Group. And I want to welcome you to the Driving the Business of Science podcast. I'm the CEO of Court Square Group. We are a managed service vendor in the life science world. We manage infrastructure for life science companies, all the way from preclinical through manufacturing. We also have a system called RegDocs 365, which is a content repository hosting any kind of clinical or regulatory content that are typically going to be used in any kind of filing to a healthcare authority. Um, as I go through my job, we run into a lot of people over the years, and I'd like to have them on the podcast because I think the concept of driving the business of science, everybody thinks about the science and the actual science behind things, but I think there's so many things that happen over the course of developing a drug that I think people don't know about some of those things. So that's the point of this podcast, is to talk about a lot of that. One of the people that we're speaking with today is Kim Guedes, who is the VP of Clinical Operations at Intensity Pharmaceuticals. And the topic that we're talking about today is stakeholder engagement, CROs, vendors, and sites. Kim, welcome, and please give us some background on yourself.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, so I am the VP of ClinOps. I've been in this industry for 30 years. We're going to stop at that time. Have started in academia, large pharma, smaller pharma CROs, and have been in the startup biotech for the last 10 years.
Fantastic. One of the things I like working with Kim is the fact that she understands a number of areas, and one of those areas is working with both the CROs and the sites and all the different areas that you're going to need to from a clinical operations perspective. Kim, can you talk a little bit about size of companies you work for and how you work with vendors hand in hand dealing with some of the sites and just the software itself that you deal with, or the applications or the systems or everything you need to deal with?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very different from large pharma to startups. Large pharma, very matrixed, and you have different people running different things. So maybe not so much input. The smaller, startup biotechs, you're in there completely getting your hands dirty every single day. And I think what's important and what's fun about these small biotechs is that you do get that say of who you're going to bring in and looking at who's the right fit. So for us, and in any small biotech, I would strongly suggest looking at your smaller mid-size CROs, somebody who you're going to get attention because you don't have the resources like the larger companies who have, tons of resources that they can tap into. So you really want to partner, and I'm going to emphasize you're partnering with them to have open conversations, to get the input and get their knowledge because they have a ton of people who have been there probably just as long as I have and may see things differently, but they're also seeing things differently across many different companies. So giving you insight into what works, what doesn't work. And I think that's really important for my CROs, my other vendors, and the sites. I mean, depending on the therapeutic area, CNS, which is my expertise, is a little bit different than rare disease oncology right now. Right now, we are dependent on these big academic centers. So just knowing that you're going to have to put some more effort into getting those sites up and running, and you need the vendors that are going to be able to help you get those sites up.
Do you feel, Kim, that maybe some of the smaller biotechs or startups have a disadvantage when trying to deal with some of the larger CROs?
Definitely, I do. And not to get hate mail after this podcast, but we don't have enough money for them to pay attention to us. They're used to dealing with the big companies, the Pfizers, the Amgens, et cetera, and mid-sized companies. We're running phase 3 studies, et cetera, but they're not, I don't have 20 phase 3 studies. I have a phase 3 study and a phase 2 study. So we really need somebody who's going to walk with us and really and in some points guide us on different things.
Now, typically the cost of that phase 3 study, whether it's a big firm or a small firm, you're still going to pay quite a bit of money for doing that, right?
We are. We're paying a lot of money, and again, that goes why I need a partner with me, who's going to work with me and not just, you know, take everything and not being able to um, follow up with people. I mean, some of the bigger CROs now have specific areas for biotechs, but a lot of them have not changed their SOPs, so it's still the big CRO. And we I don't want to use the term hand holding, but sometimes we do need some hand holding because where I have four people, a bigger pharma company will have 20 people just in the one group, let alone procurement and everybody else. So we do need some hand holding.
It's interesting. Kim and I have attended many different events together. There's lots of different clinical operations type events out there, and Kim has been a speaker at things, and I've seen her speak, as well as I've been speaking at some of these events, and we got to talking, and then we had to work together. One of the interesting parts, Kim, that I thought was the concept of fit for purpose that we've talked about a number of times, and just talking about what do I need from my vendor and how do I do that? Can you just talk a little bit about that and what you're looking for? And I think it goes a little bit to what you were just talking about with the size of the company there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It is fit for purpose, as you said. Regardless, a phase three is a very expensive study, and when I'm putting all this money into that, I also need to look at, okay, but do I need everything that that CRO is giving me? And if I do, is there another option to get something just as good, if not better, easy to work with, and that fits my budget? And, Kate, that's where you and I came in. Wasn't on the first meeting, wasn't on the second meeting. Then it was like an aha moment, like, wait a second, this just makes sense. And I went with your Reg Docs 365 because everything just goes in easily. I can see where everything is, and I don't need to pay the exorbitant fees that I would have to for somebody to be filing it for me. And it goes with training, it goes with um, packaging, manufacturing, etc. I have to look for the companies that are going to work with me, scale to what my needs are, so then I can effectively manage our budget.
It's interesting. We've done a number of podcasts, and we tailor, many of the podcasts to the business part of what's going on and how do we deal with the realities. And when you're a small company, you've got a burn rate that you have to deal with, and a burn rate, to most people who don't understand that, you only have so much money to go around. So how
Right.
much can I spend to do that? A phase 3 study is a very expensive proposition. So if you hire a large CRO, one of the tactics in this industry over the years, I've been doing this, as Kim said, for over 30 years. I've been here as well over 30 years. One of the tactics that you've seen over time is that many of the larger CROs will actually buy these software firms on purpose. So that what they do is they take all of their tools and they'll start to charge you exorbitant amounts for those as part of what you have. But then at the end of a trial, you still have to get your data back. You still have to put your data somewhere. And many companies just don't have that. We've talked a lot of times about, well, what happens after the trial's over and you lock it down and you get to find it. It's so difficult sometimes for some of these small companies. They just don't have the IT expertise to be able to deal with some of that stuff. So I'm a firm believer that if you have your own system and the CROs work in that system, or you migrate your data into that system, at least you'll have it, and then you can lock it down after that. How has that worked for you over time?
You know, it, you're exactly right. We get stuck at the end, like, what are we going to do? And CROs, like you said, will bring in these tech groups and all of your bells and whistles, and then I'm stuck paying those really high prices for them to hold my data because we don't have that infrastructure to hold anything. And again, it goes back to looking for that partner that says, yeah, I'm holding data, like, why should it cost you $1 million? It's just data sitting somewhere. But us being able to access it if we're ever inspected or we just want to do a publication, etc., we want to get back to that data. So I think it still goes back to looking for the vendors, the partners, um, that will work with us and, not bankrupt us for all of these little things at the end. And sometimes when you're working across these things, and I know startup of a study, you're just shot out of a cannon and you're just going and going because somebody's over here saying, get my first patient and get my first patient. And so you're doing these things thinking you're on the best trajectory. And then when you're closing it down, you're like, whoa, wait a second. I don't want to pay that fee. And so then you have to scramble, um, to find somebody who can hold your data. And I think, taking a step back and saying, no, we can't be shot out of a cannon. We have to look at these things because I do need to go to, the Reg Docs 365, or I do need to go to this platform to make sure that I am going to not kill us. Still, I have to pay attention to my spend at the end of the study. So,
One of the things that I've always talked about in this industry is that, I would rather see you guys spend your money on your science than on the IT systems or the different things to deal with the data. Because to be honest with you, we've been in business for over 30 years. I've worked with the largest pharmaceutical companies, and like you said, they're very siloed. They've got different groups that host everything. We host and manage applications all the way from preclinical through manufacturing, and I can see that the silos that build up over time. When you're a small company, you really don't you can't afford to have those silos, right? You need to be able to do that. One of the nice parts about um, working with you in particular was that you weren't afraid to talk with your CRO and push back on your CRO when we first
yeah,
started, because many times what will happen is smaller companies are afraid of dealing with the CRO. But I think, tell me a little bit about that and what your attitude was toward working and pushing back on that CRO.
I think the pushing back part is probably experience and knowing, if I was only in this for 10 years, 5 years, I may have been like, okay, I can't, they're going to yell at me. But again, it's a partnership and it's my study, it's my budget. So it's an old boss of mine says it's my sandbox. So we're going to play in my sandbox the way I want to play. And you always have to be collaborative. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not. But I do think it's important to have those just upfront conversations and say, look, this isn't working for me. I am going with this group. It's not going to take anything away from you except, hey, you guys don't have to do it. And, if you can metadata tag it for me, perfect. And I'm willing to pay a fee for the metadata tagging, but don't try to say that I can't do something because we all know that we can do different things. It's just people don't like change, people don't want to do it, and people don't want to give up their revenue. And I understand that. But in the big grand scheme of things, I have to look what's best for the company that I'm working for. And so going with a Reg Docs 365 made complete sense to me. And it was a little bit trial and tribulation with the CRO to get them to play nice in the sandbox with me, but we got it through, and it works. And it's really not any effort for them to metadata tag, as you know.
And for a line item, when you think about the line item of your overall study, it's such a minimal expense compared to what they would have charged you for that over the course of that study.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it frees up stuff so that we can do other things like exorbitant fees for sites. So,
Let's take a little, yeah, that's another area. I know some of the clinical operations meetings that you and I have been at together, they talk a lot about that and sites. And recently I've been talking to a lot about, startup sites and how some sites actually use that those startup dollars as their revenue stream. And they
mhm.
may never even bring in a patient. How do you deal with some of those kind of sites?
You know, um, this has been an experience. My first stint in rare disease oncology, and when it's not negotiable, not refundable. And I've tried working it into actually my contracts where it says, okay, I'll pay these fees on top of your 38% overhead and everything else, but I will pay them in increments. So you get me two patients and I'll pay you this. You get me three patients, I pay you this. And if they've told me on their questionnaire that they can get me five patients, they can get me eight patients, that's what I'm putting into their contract. I do have sites that will do that. And then I have sites that absolutely will not do that at all. And I understand sites are getting hit a lot by studies going up, studies coming down, although these are non-refundable fees. I think you just have to you have to be careful. You have to look at and do your homework. What has this site put in before for a similar study, similar infusion or injection, etc. And it doesn't always mean it's going to be right for this study, and that's what they're going to do. But you definitely have to do your homework on it and see what they're doing. And looking at the type of data they're bringing in. You can bring me 10 patients, but if your data is lousy, and that's where you go to your IRBs and have that discussion on what did the data look like from this site. And I think these are just things you learn with experience on where you can go to get all of this information to protect yourself as best you can.
Do you tend to skew toward those sites that are more willing to work with you over time then?
Absolutely. It's like anything. If somebody's not willing to work or they just shut down, to me, that's just a red flag for what's to come. How are they going to work on my questionnaires? Are they going to be putting patients in? What is their data going to look like? Is my CRO going to be fighting with them to clean up queries? So I think you get that right from the beginning, right from negotiating budgets, etc., even though different groups, or they bring in their reg uh, coordinators, and even the emails that you see going back and forth. How are they acting towards us? If it's collegial, that's great, and that's what I want to work with. I want to work with somebody who wants to work with us.
Great. Let's shift gears a little bit. I know that you've got a few things you do. You're a runner?
Well, I pretend, yeah. I
Eh,
pretend at the gym and I cycle for the Alzheimer's Association, but
there we
yeah.
go. Can talk a little bit about that. I know that the Alzheimer's Association is near and dear to your heart. Talk a little bit about that and maybe give them a plug.
Yeah, thanks. So I am on the executive committee for the Ride to End Owls up in your area, the Massachusetts, New Hampshire area. And it is near and dear. I mean, we're all getting older. We all forget things on any given Friday. I swear I would fail all the tests, but you know, the the reality is that this is very scary, and now that there's no federal funding, we're really dependent on groups like the Alzheimer's Association to bring research and help companies like me or other companies to get studies out there so we could find something. But it is a lot of fun. I only do 30 miles because, well, that's me. And I do try to up my miles every year, but right now we're sticking with 30.
Very good, very good. So how has it helped? What's been some of the things are there any breakthroughs that you can talk about or anything that has come out of all the work that you've done with the Alzheimer's Foundation?
I think that the best thing is the support for the caregivers, support for the patients, and you have a lot of writers who have, their mother, father, aunt, uncle have had Alzheimer's. You actually have writers who have early Alzheimer's. So it's really just seeing what your efforts are what they're going to. And it's really nice getting out there and just being part of it and knowing that there's something bigger than you out there.
Now you have one coming up, correct?
I do, June 14th up in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. So, and I'm trying to get you to ride. I don't know what's happening with that one, but
Uh, well, I'm getting my knees replaced, so that's probably not going to happen. So until
okay.
those heal up, then maybe I'll do it next year. How's that?
That's good. It's a beautiful course. The 30 miles is really easy. I've heard people say the 60 is really easy too. So it won't be hard on your knees. And there are electric bikes. I hate saying it, but there are.
Well, I wouldn't use an electric bike if I was going to go on the ride.
Okay.
So we go bike riding on Cape Cod quite a bit. So we like the rail trails out there, and we always see the Pan Mass Challenge come through every year. So I think that Massachusetts and Northeast in general has had a lot of those kind of rides for different types of illnesses. So I'm glad that we're able to highlight for you the Alzheimer's um,
Yeah,
Foundation.
thank you. It is a great it's a great time. And we do have a biotech meeting coming up that we did invite you to. I think you have something planned, but it's in April in Cambridge. So we are
Excellent.
doing that too. And it's for people like you, me, to get out there, talk, learn more about it, and really connect with other groups to see how can, your group help me. And I think that's what's great about all the talks that we go to and meetings, just like this meeting coming up. It's how can we work together to move things forward?
Well, and I think that's a big part of being in this industry. Everybody thinks that the pharmaceutical industry is so big, and the reality is it's really not. It's actually a
Hmm.
very small industry. There's people, there's a lot of people aging out. They've been in it for a long time, and they're starting to retire. So a new crop of people are coming in. We get heavily involved in a number of groups within either DIA or IRIS, and helping just to kind of to push the message around so that people can understand that we need fresh blood in this industry coming out of some of the programs. There are a number of university programs that are actually starting to work with people in clinical operations as well as regulatory operations, which is great because it's just getting so much more difficult particularly when you're looking at all of the different countries you have to do it. Do you guys have to deal with that now with intensity, or are you still in just the U.S.?
No, we're global. And you're right. It's understanding what can I do in one country versus another country, and what drug can I send to one country? How does it have to be labeled, etc. But it's getting very difficult across all the countries, and we're expanding to new countries like South Korea. Um, in places that are naive to a lot of the research, but we're getting um, newer patients, and we're giving back an opportunity for patients to actually get treatment too.
Very good. I've recently been very involved with a company doing a lot of work with the clinical supply chain of drugs. So I'm learning a lot about the clinical supply chain and the aspect of getting drugs back and forth between countries, particularly on the commercial side. But then when you think about the clinical trial side and all of the issues you have to deal with, particularly if the drugs are temperature sensitive and you want to make sure that they get there and they haven't been adulterated and all that kind of stuff. So a whole different world that leads into. So, people don't think about that when they're thinking about it, or they're talking about how much it costs to generate a drug. They don't think about how much we have to put in to safeguard those drugs, particularly when they go to clinical trials that are going to go offshore. Those are going to
Yeah,
be big things that we have to deal with.
they are, and looking at the drug, to your point, our drug has to be frozen, and we have to put in temperature probes, and we have to make sure we can get it there through customs of any other country and then into the site within a certain amount of time, frozen. Because if my drug thaws, then it's no good to any of us. It has to be infused within 4 hours of it being thawed. So really making sure that um, we have all those safeguards in place, and we have the people who know how to get those safeguards and track the drug, and making sure the drug doesn't go out during a storm. Or if there is, I'm shipping drug from California to here, is there anything going on in between? And this year has been pretty volatile for, everywhere in this
Travel in general.
country. Yeah, exactly. So, we have to think about all of those things.
Well, I want to thank you, Kim. It's been a great conversation. Are there any last words you'd like to talk to people about, either in your case for Intensity or the Alzheimer's Foundation, or anything that's on your mind to close us out today?
Thank you so much for inviting me here. This was a great experience. I um I think companies just need to be careful, think through things, don't push your ops people to get that first patient in. Go methodically, take those steps because when you push out real quick, you're going to have to pull back, and that pulling back to restart things, it just costs you so much more money. So think it through step by step, and have those deep discussions with your teams, and you'll save your budget. You'll still get your patients, they're not going anywhere, and you'll make your timelines.
That's fantastic. I was just at a conference out in Napa Valley, and I think one of the comments that was made there was maybe we need to slow down so that we can speed up. And I think that
Exactly.
fits right in line with what you're talking about. Let's not push so hard to get that first patient in as much as let's push hard to get the right things set up so that we get the first patient in and have those
Exactly.
working
Gives
in the
me
right way.
time to assess the vendors like you guys and other vendors to say, does this make sense? And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to slow down in order to do things right and then move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kim. And this has
Thank
been
you.
the Business of Science, Drive the Business of Science podcast. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks,
I
Kim.
think